This is the Dallas Morning News.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into Sportsday Insider presented by the Dallas Morning News. I am Kevin Sherrington, joined by my old pals Evan Grant and David Moore. Fellas, how are we doing today?
Swimmingly.
Swimmingly. I love that. You know, that's kind of one of those phrases that these kids today, they're not going to use. They're not even going to know what you're talking about.
Just go, what?
Is he in his pool or something? What's he talking about? Swimmingly.
What does that even mean?
We need to bring some of that back.
David's not happy with me.
David's no less happy with you than anybody else in the sports department of the Dallas Morning News, where Evan Grant, for those of you on the outside may know, we got great with the new sports editor. We've gone 8 months without, or however many months it's been, without a meeting, and Evan got us a meeting, a staff meeting. Like everybody wanted to have a staff meeting. So, I had to send a message to Brad Townsend, by the way, in the Zoom meeting. He put his hand up, and I sent him a message saying, put your hand back down. We're trying to get out of here. That was always the rule in the old days of Sports Day, whenever we would have these monthly meetings, which were just pure hell, that if anybody raised their hand or tried to say something, we'd take them outside afterwards and beat them up.
Well, we should say
no one policed that more than Jerry Fraley.
Yes, we should say two things here.
He was the sergeant of arms. He was the sergeant of arms at that.
Kevin is, of course, joking. We all look forward to any opportunity to collaborate together in a convivial way. And two, yes, in the old days, Fraley was the sergeant at arms, and glared at anybody who had anything to say in a staff meeting, which is why I never spoke in a staff meeting for the first, 15 years I was at the Dallas Morning News.
That was your best 15 years, by the way.
I'm making up for it now.
Yeah.
Quick aside, me, Jerry, and Brad were walking out one day, and it's, you walk out the back, and it was like a loading dock as you walk back to your car in the covered lot. We're walking back there, just laughing, having a very nice conversation, all three of us. And then right where the loading dock breaks up, where you're about to go to your car, all of a sudden we're standing there. Jerry looks at Brad and goes, "What the hell were you thinking about speaking up in that meeting like that?"
That sounds like Jerry, doesn't it? Oh, man. Those were the good old days.
We sports writers, we love to write about team meetings. We just don't like to have them.
No. Nobody wants a team meeting. Oh, not really. All right. So let's pick up, because speaking of the things that we don't want to do, talking about the Cowboys.
Is that what?
Yeah, I don't know.
Was that the segue?
Oh, my gosh. As if it weren't bad enough to watch. So
let's go back to the meeting stuff.
Yeah, no kidding. I'm going to tell you, David, because Evan and I are just watching that game on television, and I thought Al Michaels was going to jump out of the booth at some point because of all the flags that were flying in that game. And
Al Michaels seems a little testier at this stage of his career than he did, say, maybe 10, 15 years ago.
Well, he's getting closer to the end, like a lot of us are, and we don't want to spend those last few remaining hours watching officials throw flags. Holy cow! I will say this.
Well, here's an idea. Maybe players shouldn't have those infractions. How about that?
Well, maybe they should, but I'm going to say that
maybe your first-round pick shouldn't jump off sides 3 times in a game. How about a hold 3 times in a game?
I think that probably on Tyler Guyton, you could probably call throw a flag on him on almost every play, probably. So I got no problem with that. But there were a lot of other ticky-tack things going on there, and I have to believe that the commissioner had to get on the phone there and tell somebody the next morning, look, you guys are going to have to stop throwing so many flags because you're killing us. This is a prime-time telecast, and you're killing us with all this kind of stuff.
I don't recall whether it was the Falcons-Eagles or the Falcons, because the Falcons are on national TV so much now, but one of those last 2 games that they played against the Chiefs or the Eagles, they couldn't run a play without a flag being thrown. So if the commissioner's been on the phone, ain't nobody listening.
Well, to me, you got to do something about it. You're going to have to say to them, unless this is an egregious play, especially no one wants to see a play reversed, like a 60-yard run, and there's some kind of ticky-tack foul back here that may or may not have had anything to do with the play or not. It's like, you guys swallow your whistle on half the plays anyway. I mean, right? We all know that. If you really want to get down to it, and you watching the line play, you could call a penalty almost every play. And I just have to feel at some point they have to tell them, look, unless this is a game-changing kind of thing here, I need you to just let this stuff go, especially when you've got just a torrent of flags as it is.
Hey, well, the trend is you have more early in the season, and part of that is because these guys don't play in the preseason, and so their first contact and doing all the tweaks that were made on the offensive and defensive side of the ball and the fundamentals of, okay, well, now you need to tackle this way to avoid this being called a foul. They just haven't. It's not part of their muscle memory because the practice structure is different in training camp and preseason. These dissipate. The last few years have shown penalties are up. This is not unusual. Penalties are higher early in the season and then start to dissipate as the season goes along.
Not for the Cowboys, they're not. They seem to be up all year long.
Some teams cling to them over the course of the season. It becomes their identity.
What do the Cowboys do well? Hold.
Yeah. Well, they're in a holding pattern for, we know that for Super Bowls, right?
Hey, on the nature of flags, there was on Twitter the other day, or X as us hip kids like to call it, I saw a tweet and it was the old B-roll of the open for NFL Today, the original NFL Today on CBS, with Brent Musburger and Irv Cross and Jimmy the Greek. And so they roll the highlight and it says underneath, virtually every play in this highlight film would be a flag today. And if you watch the video, yes, it would be. But that's what the NFL was in 1975, and it's not what it is in 2024.
Yeah, I think that, look, we don't want to see what happened a couple of years ago where the Saints got ripped off of a Super Bowl, right? Where there was no, penalty called. It was a clear, foul or something like that. And I guess that's what I'm kind of looking for. In a real-time environment, you want the game to move. You don't want to be dragging things down. But you'd almost rather have somebody in the booth calling these kind of things and say, and not where they're calling New York, but they're just saying, if I see something like that in that New Orleans play, well, that's a flag. I'm throwing the flag from the booth. Boom. I can see that. I'm going right here. And also there needs to be a call about if on some of these flags, just pick it up. Because I don't, even if I'm pulling for one team or the other, which never happens, I don't have a team to pull for anymore. But if I were, I don't want to see, a great play called back because of something like that. There's no fun in that. There's no fun in watching that kind of thing happen.
Thank you, everybody, for coming to Cranky Old Man on Football Stinks today.
I think that people would agree with me on this. I think that our listeners out there are going, that is exactly right. I think once you get to 10 penalties, it's all free after that. So anything after 10 penalties doesn't count, and we're going.
You'd like to see a little bit more common sense applied with some of the penalty calls. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. But we didn't come here to do that. We came here to rip on the Cowboys.
Yeah, we did. So David, let's talk about the fact that they have now lost, I would say, certainly two of their three best, I think you would agree with me, two of their three best defensive players for at least a number of weeks. I'm going to say at a minimum of 3 weeks to 4 weeks, probably both of them will be out. And that, meaning DeMarcus Lawrence, of course, and Micah Parsons. And that Micah Parsons may be gone longer than that because of a high ankle sprain, which, depending on the position, that could mean shorter or longer. So, Dave, give us some perspective on that of athletes that you have seen with the Cowboys who have had that type of injury and how long they've been out.
Well, quickly, Parsons, I would say, Lawrence, I doubt that he'll be back before the Thanksgiving game. I think he, again, it's a Lisfranc injury, not fracture. So the bones were not displaced, but still there's severe ligament damage in there. It's a 4 to 8 week time frame with him from the people I've talked to. Lean toward the 8 on that. And remember, he's missed time before with 2 separate foot injuries. He's north of 30. I think there are a lot of factors there that it's. I think you're looking at him late November, December before he returns. Parsons, there's a little more ambiguity with it. It is a high ankle sprain. The thing you don't know on a high ankle sprain is where is it on the ankle. I've been told through the years that it depends because I've asked this question before. It's like, well, I've seen guys who miss, 6 to 8 weeks on a high ankle sprain, and then others will be back in 2 to 3 weeks half the time. And like, how is that? And they said it really is the severity of the sprain and how high up on the ankle it is. So the whole region, which entails the high ankle sprain, the I believe the lower it is on the high ankle, the better as far as your chance to get back. And so that's what we on the outside don't know. Just where did the sprain take place? I've been told 2 to 4 on him. Now, he is an elite athlete. I I will say this, all ankle sprains are not created equal, but if you go back to Tyron Smith early in his career, he had a high ankle sprain and I believe he was out 10 days, which is about the quickest I've seen anyone come back. And I would argue it's also positionally based as well. I think this is a little more problematic for Micah Parsons because he's such an explosive player. His whole game is getting off the snap quickly, getting to the quarterback. That's explosion. If you don't have full force on that ankle, it's going to impact your ability or disrupt your, routine and your technique as far as when you're going in. If you're pushing off on one foot more than the other, and then maybe you can't get your leverage when you come to make a move with your other foot the way you could because it's not quite 100% yet.
David, you need to be David.
Yes.
You need to be the first reporter to take the high ankle sprain to the next level and report whether it's a low high ankle sprain or a high ankle sprain.
High. high. It's a high ankle sprain. So, look, he won't play this weekend against Pittsburgh. Could he play in Detroit? Maybe. We'll know that early next week. But then you get into, okay, well, wait. There's a bye after the Detroit game. And they played on a Thursday night. So if he doesn't play these next two games against Pittsburgh or Detroit, then you have the bye. Then you're giving him more than 3.5 weeks to get ready for the San Francisco game. And that seems more in line with what would seem to make sense as you manage this injury over the course of the season. So I think that's the most likely scenario. I would not completely rule out that he plays against Detroit yet, but I would say looking at it that circles San Francisco is the first serious chance that he might be able to work his way back in.
So with him out and with DeMarcus Lawrence out, the Cowboys pass rush is almost non-existent. And
it was non-existent before, if you want to.
Well, I was going to say it was not very good before. And
when you're behind, and teams are running on you for 290 something yards, I guess that kind of does that.
Well, yeah, I mean, the problem was the running defense, was it not? I mean, weren't teams gashing them on the ground?
Yeah, and so the pass attempts were way down because they didn't have to pass because they were controlling the game on the ground with big leads. So it did cut into, but that was the opponent's plan, right? Because that cuts into a Dallas strength, which is getting to the quarterback. But this is not just a Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence go down against the Giants thing. This is Sam Williams, who was considered going into the season was going to be your second main pass rush option to Micah Parsons, goes out with an ACL injury. This is Dorrance Armstrong, who has been an outstanding complimentary pass rusher these past couple of seasons, not being re-signed and being allowed to leave in free agency. It was Dante Fowler, a veteran pass rusher, not coming back. This team lost a lot of pass rush in the offseason and was going to compensate for it differently. But now three of the players, their three main players to compensate for what they lost in the pass rush are now all out with injury. So what does this defense look like now?
Yeah, I noticed in that game, and it was that Andrew Thomas was drawing Micah a lot in that game, and he was not being doubled and was still not getting to the quarterback. Now, there was a couple of times you saw one play where he just bull rushed the guy. It wasn't Thomas; it was the right tackle into the pocket. It was just an unbelievable play that's what we see of Micah Parsons most of the time. And I'm just wondering a little bit, there just seems to have been times this season where he hasn't been himself. He doesn't look as explosive this season as we've seen him look in previous seasons. What we see now, when we see that, we see it from DeMar being overshown, right? You see the tremendous closing speed on him, where we even had a play earlier this season where he blows past, Micah, they're chasing the Deshaun Watson in the opener, and made the play and made the sack. And that was the kind of play you would see Micah make previously. I'm wondering, is it possible that he was a little dinged up before this, David, and we just didn't know it?
I don't think so. I think you look at it, I think it has a lot more to do. Look, I thought he was dominant in that Cleveland game. I thought it was back in the back. I thought it was back around, Deshaun Watson all game. What happened was New Orleans, but I think Derek Carr threw 18 times all game. So instead of rushing the quarterback 35 to 40 times, like he was in many games last season when they were playing from ahead, he was rushing 18 times and was doubled 13, 14 of those times. And the other thing he said too, he gave New Orleans credit for, he said it was a different scheme to contain him than what they'd seen. And I think Baltimore did this as well a little bit, and the Giants too, is that it looks like it's single. The first guy engages, but then another guy chips, and you kind of create like a maze that he has to weave through to get to the quarterback. So you're not necessarily blocking him, but there's another body in the way that you have to like move around, even if he's not throwing a body on him. So it's giving him, once he gets in there, giving him more traffic he has to weave through to get to the quarterback. And so I think that was a tweak of a look on something he hadn't really seen before, is what he said coming out of the New Orleans game. And I think he's dealt with that a little bit. Baltimore didn't throw all that much either. And they ran for about 80 more yards on the ground than New Orleans did, as hard as that is to believe. So when you have two opponents and you ran for 464 yards and 7, and here's the other thing. I think that when teams are running that much, you get a great pass rusher back on his heels. He's going to have to be part of the run game. And you keep throwing bodies at him, you get him moving backwards, and you don't allow him to move forward. And there are fewer snaps where he's moving forward. And I think all of that kind of conspire to have a very uncharacteristic start for Micah Parsons in his first 4 games compared to his first 3 seasons in this league.
So with that in mind, going forward against the Steelers, they've had their issues at quarterback, several quarterbacks that they've tried out this year. So I would expect they would do the same thing, right? They're going to try to run the football and see if what the Cowboys did against
what
the
they
Giants,
always do. Sure.
If they can sustain that or not.
I would. It was interesting though. You would have thought the Giants would have done the same thing, and they had one of their better passing games as Dallas really loaded up. And I will say, I do not understand how a team that gave up 464 yards over 2 games could come back against a Giants team. And yes, I know it's the Giants, but they were also ranked in the top 5 in the league in rushing, and allow only 26 yards on the ground and 24 carries. That is inexplicable to me, and it goes beyond scheme. It does speak to temperament, desire, not backing down. I don't know how you can explain it, because it's not just a schematic. It wasn't like some schematic change flipped the switch. This was about effort and playing your lanes and going about your job and doing your job, which I think is why we heard all these, veiled criticisms of, we need to be more professional around here. Apparently that wasn't happening earlier in the season. But here's the other thing I'll say on that is, Pittsburgh's going to run. I mean, Pittsburgh's always been a balanced team that runs more than most teams, even when the league was going pass happy by and large. They're not going to deviate from that. It's in their DNA. But I think what else comes with that? It's play action. And if you don't get any pressure on the quarterback, you can make a team pay in the play action game. I think if, Dallas gets no pressure on the quarterback and you let Justin Fields or whoever is back there, you give him more than 2.5 seconds to just stand in the pocket and wait for the receivers to come open, they're going to come open. So I would really anticipate in these two games that Dallas may be okay against the run, but their inability to pressure the quarterback is going to allow him potentially just to pick apart a secondary.
And because they can't mount a pass rush, or they probably won't be able to mount a pass rush out of their base off defense, you would expect that they would blitz more. And that's not something they've done a lot of. And you believe that probably that their standard blitzers would be guys like Donovan Wilson and Jordan Lewis. But I would also
he's one of
wonder
their better blitzers, and Jordan Lewis as well. Now, Zimmer is also like to blitz his linebackers. So you'll see Kendricks at times. Overshown's a natural because of his speed. And, we're talking, look, a rookie, Marshawn Nealon's going to take one of the starting spots that's open here in the defensive line. Chauncey Golston, who's in his fourth year here, who's been inside, outside, just been a bit player. He's going to be the other starter now. Again, pretty good against the run, not much of a pass rush. Those guys are being plugged in, but it's going to be someone like, now you look at the front seven, you go, who has the most talent there? Who can impact a game? And you can make a pretty good argument, even though he's only 4 games into his career, that it's DeMarvion Overshown. So how do you use Overshown, and what is he going to do here with these other guys out? I think he's a key to how successful they are in the front seven.
Yeah, I think so too. He's looked like a much more dynamic player than he was at Texas, and I don't recall how much maybe injuries might have impacted his style then. But you would think a guy who has looked as dynamic as he has for the Cowboys so far in his second season would have dominated in college. And
I know you said that and you followed them, and it's like, even last year before the injury, he really flashed, and he was like, wow, this guy really now. But at that point, it was like there are a lot of talented players around. Maybe that's freeing him up. But to come back off the ACL and still move the way he has in these first 4 games this season, after missing a big portion of training camp at the end because he had a hip pointer as he was working his way back from that ACL. It's been really impressive. His closing speed is noticeably at a different level than many of the other players out there on the field.
No question about that.
I want to congratulate you both for getting all the way through a Cowboys segment without mentioning the names Derek or Henry.
Oh, well, the guy went off for, what was it, like 1,000
He only
yards?
had 199 the other Monday night.
Yeah. Jerry also would like to thank you for getting through a segment without mentioning Derrick Henry. Well, but let's move on to the Rangers talk, Kevin.
Well, I think Derrick Henry's name will be mentioned quite a bit over the course of this season. And
it's interesting.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Kevin.
No, I was just going to say it's interesting to me to see how much teams with running games have been successful so far this year. And it seems to me that I wonder if we're starting to see a little bit of a shift here.
The pendulum always swings, and I think all these teams building and pass and like going nickel and dime, and it's like, well, no, let's run these guys in space and get some good runners and go and attack it there. And you're seeing it. It's always going to be an ebb and flow and a pendulum, and I think you're starting to see that a little bit. Very quickly, I know we need to move on because Evan is demanding his time here for the Rangers, and rightfully so. But we've talked a little bit before. We haven't talked about it today, but we've talked about it earlier this season. The Cowboys running back by committee. They don't have a committee. Let's talk running back by committee with Detroit next week. When you look at David Montgomery and Jamar Gibbs, that's a committee, not what the Cowboys call a running back committee.
Do the Cowboys have a subcommittee?
Committees work.
Yeah.
Committee is not a euphemism for.
I don't know if committees work.
No, some committees work. I
can
see that point. Not all committees work. I get that completely.
David's committee, Detroit's committee, is one with a pedigree. The Cowboys committee, I mean, there was a pedigree at one time with Zeke Elliott, no question about it. But those are two different animals.
Cowboys committee can't even get a pedicure. Was that where you're going? Were you going to do that wordplay?
I like the alliteration of it anyway. All right, so Evan and I were both out at the Rangers closing presser on Tuesday. I was out there a little later than Evan was. I had some really important things to do before I got there, so I was 10 minutes late. Came barging in, and made my big clatter.
Kevin stumbled through the door.
Some of the fell
tripped
over
the
Chris
cables that were broadcasting the event.
Yeah. Oh, here's what I want to ask you, Evan: did the Rangers that press conference today with the general manager and the manager, is that the largest two-man combination in baseball? Bruce Bochy and Chris Young.
My God, if they had a point guard, could you imagine what they would be like in 3-on-3?
Yeah, pretty good. They'd kill everybody. Well, first of all, you just lob it to Chris anyway.
Well, sure. But I mean, Boch makes a pretty nice power forward in the game.
I tell you, those some big boys up there. Some big boys.
They were. I will say this: Boch's mobility might not be his strongest suit, but
you don't want that. We'd be dribbling all around him. There's no question about that. So, Evan, you have written 1,000 stories here, postmortems on the Rangers season, and
okay. Now I question that total. Are we going to have to go through and count? I don't think it was 1,000.
David is very sensitive to this byline issue. We have to be very careful with him because we have a byline count at the paper. Believe this or
advanced metrics are everything, Kevin.
Oh my gosh. If I'm thinking about seeing if there's some way for me just to get my byline in the count somehow. There's nothing behind it, which is as usual, but just my byline. Just like I'm gonna start typing in my byline like 50 times and see if that works somehow.
I don't
know. Yeah, it could help. Couldn't hurt. So we talked about what's been going wrong out there, and I will say this for these kinds of pressers, there were some interesting things that were brought up, and I'm going to go right to the head of the class with mine. Evan didn't like this, but I really thought it was interesting when you asked the question of both Chris Young and Bruce Bochy about Marcus Semien and what his role was going to be going forward, and of course I think Marcus's WAR went down, according to Baseball Reference, from something like 7.6 last year to I think 3.6. Oh my gosh, Evan has been attacked. Oh my gosh, there are wolves in Evan's beautiful little flat there. Oh my gosh, are you okay, Evan? Everything is all right?
Bonnie was just doing some protecting here. There was a lot of protecting going on. Do we want to take that out?
I think it's
Bonnie.
Oh my gosh. My gosh.
Leave it in.
Try to keep the animals down, okay? So my point being that, and Bruce Bochy made this point as well, okay, we did see a significant drop in the performance of Marcus Semien over last year, but he still scored 100 runs. He still hit over 20 home runs. He still played terrific defense. And so, look, there's no question he's still the second best player on this team. But they have to get him to play at a little bit higher level. And one of the things you brought up was the fact that, he played 160 games once again, which I think everybody thinks is too many. I think Bruce Bochy in particular thinks it's too many, and that he needs to sit down every once in a while. And Bochy, to his credit, said at the press conference, yes, we did talk to him about that. And I thought the other interesting thing he brought up was that there's a possibility as well that we would like to drop him in the lineup, maybe even into the 3-hole, which has been pretty much a black hole for the last 2 years. Even in the World Series run, they still struggled in the number 3 spot in the order, and they certainly did this year as well as in other places. So I want to ask you about that, Evan.
Well, I do think it was really significant, Kevin. I mean, I do think it was significant that they mentioned both these things, and really it was kind of, it was more of a what's Marcus's status going forward, and they expounded on it. But I also feel like, here's the thing: you post up every day like Semien does and plays 160 games, and you bat leadoff every day, and if you make changes to that, it appears a lot more drastic than all the guys who had to move around the lineup all year because they weren't hitting, and guys who are going to move around next year and probably not play as much, i.e. Adolis Garcia, Leody Taveras, and Jonah Heim. So I think that, when you've got one constant like you do with Semien playing second base and leading off every day, and you make any kind of fluctuation to that, it becomes a bigger deal. But Marcus was part of the issue this year. There's no doubt about it. He had a significant downturn in his production. His ground ball rate was up. His hard hit rate was down. And yeah, he finished with basically a 700 OPS, which is not what you're paying $27 million a year for. So I do think it's significant that the Rangers would look at potentially making some changes at the top of the lineup. And the obvious guy there, if he's healthy, is Evan Carter. And if you put Evan Carter there, my question is, do you consider hitting Semien second and Seager third, so you go left, right, left? Your point, and I think we both discussed this, is if you hit Semien in the number 2 spot, are you with the ground ball rate that he has, are you looking for a ton of double plays there? So that's also to be considered. But I just want to be clear that Semien's contribution to this team this year, I think, was still on a positive side. And I think his WAR, while it was halved, it was still like 3.5, which is close to an all-star player. There were a lot of other guys that the Rangers simply had no answers for this year. And that to me is the real issue. How do you fix an offense in which it seems everybody forgot how to hit a fastball? And can you fix that? Can you fix the inability to hit a fastball?
Now, I think it's a great question, and what complicates this even more, and sitting at that press conference over on the side was Ray Davis, the owner, and it was interesting when Chris Young made the point, and whether this is just Chris Young acknowledging that or something that Ray Davis has pointed out to him, was that there are teams that are in the playoffs this year had payrolls smaller than the Rangers, and yes, there's no question about that, and it is an indictment of the Rangers farm system and their player development that they have not produced more players. Now, they have in the last few years, but they should be, if they were doing things the right way all along, if they'd been, you would have players in their late 20s who came up through their system who would be at least somewhat manageable. Not everybody, you don't have to get a Josh Young every time, right? Out of the draft. You got to get serviceable players who are good players who are not going to cost you a lot of money to supplement around the places where you're having to spend money, noticeably at shortstop and second base.
And in particular, homegrown starting pitching. And look, I think the starting pitching situation has improved. I do think that Cody Bradford has been kind of that overachiever who will be a stable, reliable guy in a rotation. Is he number 3? Probably not. Is he number 4? He probably is. But I think he'll be a guy who can give you some innings. The guys that you would hope at the top of the rotation, have either been stalled by injuries in the case of Kumar Rocker or by ineffectiveness in the case of Jack Leiter. I think it was good that both those guys pitched in the big leagues all September. It's clearly a big step forward for Kumar coming back from elbow surgery. I think there are a number of guys in the system who could potentially contribute next year. But let's also be honest, Kevin. I mean, you're going to have a rotation that's, the bulk of your starts come from Cody Bradford, Kumar Rocker, Jack Leiter, Alejandro Rosario, and Emiliano Teodo, and expect to go to the playoffs. That's counting on an awful lot of young guys to hit. So once again, the Rangers are going to be out there looking for starting pitching, and starting pitching is a market inefficiency. It's expensive, and that's probably why the Rangers are only going to be able to address that side of the ball and won't be able to do much on the offensive side.
Not unless they make some trades. And at this point, look, let's look at it this way too, because this is something that I'm going to deal with in a column here shortly. And that's the Bruce Bochy question, which he is under contract through next year. Asked him that question today at the press conference about how he feels about everything, because of course he got back in it because he thought the Rangers could win. They did win. It was fabulously successful in that first season. Not so good this year. He acts like he still likes it, still excited about going out there. I have no reason to doubt him when he says that. But I would think that going into this final season of his contract, if he goes through another year like this one, that's it, don't you think? I don't think he'd want to come back.
I think if the Rangers don't do well this year and it becomes clear that this group that they had counted on to be their part of their core, these young guys or youngish guys like Heim and Tavares, and the questions about whether or not Evan Carter or Josh Young can stay on the field enough. If you've not won and the young guys haven't turned into a core group with a real bright future, yeah, I could see him walking away. On the other hand, if the Rangers win it all next year, I guarantee you he'll be back for 26 because Bochy wants to prove all these people with their other year devil magic stuff full of crap.
Yeah, I don't doubt that either. I mean, yeah, I think he would stay as long as he could if they were winning. Even if they were getting deep into the playoffs, they don't have to win it all. He gets to the ALCS next year, he's coming back, right? I mean, but if he has another season where they miss the playoffs completely, I think he'll say, yeah, that's enough. And I'm like you, he'll look at it like we're not going anywhere here.
Yeah,
they regressed this year. There's no question about that across the board.
Yeah.
And so, why stick, hang around for something like that? And because he said, look, at my age and he is 70, 71. What
He'll
is
be
he?
70 next April.
Okay. So, yeah, absolutely. He's got plenty of money now. He can go back home to Nashville and have a nice time. As he said, he's going to Florida to do a little fishing. But he'll be back.
All about money, Kevin.
Of course I'm all about money. At the end of my career, I'm very much about money since I'm still working past normal retirement age because I don't have any money. And that's a very big issue with me. I thought it was very interesting too. Stephen Hawkins with Associated Press asked Bochy about Pete Rose. And
did he ask him about his schedule?
He did not ask about his schedule. Amazingly not. And he's not interested in anybody else's schedule, only his own.
Let me tell you, for listeners out there that don't know Stephen Hawkins, he is a wonderful guy, very warm, but Stephen has never met a person he won't tell his schedule to.
Yeah, he's big on letting you know that. But he did ask him about Pete Rose and about any thoughts about Pete. And I was interested to see what he was going to say. And he said some very nice things about Pete and about growing up a Reds fan because his dad was a Reds fan. He did not mention the playoffs, I think it was 1980, between the Astros and the Phillies, in which Pete Rose plowed into him trucked him at a key point in the game. And they went on to win that game. And, of course, the Phillies eliminated the Astros from the playoffs.
But here's the thing. Bochy's been involved in like so many seminal moments in baseball over the course of his year that occasionally one or two drop. I mean, he was the catcher the night that Rose set the all-time hit record.
I know he did bring that up. He brought up that. I thought it was really interesting. But I think, part of it for me was just my impression of who he is that I don't want to bring that up. I don't want to bring up the fact that he, trucked me. That makes me too much a part of the story about Pete Rose passing. And that's just kind of the beauty of Bruce Bochy to me, that he's a really smart guy who really tries hard not to look smart.
100%. I thought Mike Maddox summed him up so well before last year when he said, look slow, talk slow, think fast.
Yes, absolutely. That is absolutely what he is. I love when he's honest with you about, these players and who they are. And unfortunately, I don't have the kind of relationship with him that allows him to do that with me. I remember with Ron Washington, you go, especially at spring training, you go sit down with him and you get all the stuff you could put into the paper. Then I'd say, okay, now tell me what you think about these guys. And then he'd go over them all and just eviscerating everybody, and he gave you a straight up on what he thought about everyone on the team. And that's when you realize how smart he really was and how much of a baseball guy he really was when he was honest with you and talking about these things. And I love to know what Bochy thinks about these players and the guys. You get an idea. I mean, like Wyatt Langford, when he's talking about him, clearly he loves the kid. And what's not to love about him, right? But you can tell this is a guy that he really believes in.
No, look, and Langford made an impression in spring training. And I think the thing that the Rangers most were encouraged about was at a time when most rookies are wearing down in the latter stages of the season, Wyatt took off. He was the American League's Player of the Month for September and had a better OPS in September than Aaron Judge did. And I was impressed by that Here was a guy who, he struggled to hit the fastball early in the season, and he came to the Rangers with the reputation of being able to hit the fastball. But he made swing changes when he was on the IL in May, and that really took hold, and it made his bat path a little bit more level and not as prone to getting under the ball. And so they like his aptitude, they like his work ethic, they like how hard he plays. He's shown himself to be a better than average defensive outfielder. He's shown himself obviously to be a really good base runner. And he busts it hard every time. So yeah, he's the kind of throwback that that Bochy loves with new age skills. I will say this, I haven't said this, or I didn't tweet this, but there was a catch he made in Anaheim when he was playing center field. I think it was on Saturday. Kind of reached up and made an awkward catch in center field. And just for a moment, the way his body looked as he went up there, it reminded me of a young Mike Trout. I think that he's got abilities to be a game-changing player like that. That's obviously the top of the ceiling for him, but he's got those kinds of abilities.
Well, there's no question. That's what he came into the game as, right? Mike Trout starter kit, and Mike Trout's a Hall of Famer, so it's hard to say that he's going to be that. But yeah, I was thinking about that when Bochy was talking about him playing the outfield and how he was not a natural outfielder, right? He came up as a catcher at Florida, and a catcher who didn't play, and so. But he's got great speed. And to me, people I think they have bad ideas about center field. They think it's, you have to be something great to play center field. Well, yes, you want instincts, but mostly you want speed in the outfield, in center field. And the great thing about playing center field is, as opposed to left or right, you don't have the ball slicing and hooking on you like you do in center field. The ball is pretty true. And then you have a lot of room to roam and run, and you have command out there. And it's a much more fun position to play than left and right field is. So I don't think it's as difficult for him to play center field as a lot of people think it will be. And I thought...
No, it's just the wear and tear that goes along with the position
absolutely.
And how much you run.
That was Josh Hamilton, right? Yeah. He was a really good outfielder, but
he was also a huge center fielder. Yeah.
A very big guy. But he's a little, Langford's a little bit more like Trout. Trout probably shouldn't be playing center field anymore, but he's also 31, 32, and he's had 1,000 injuries. Wyatt Langford is a very durable looking. He looks like a running back playing baseball, and just like Trout looks like, and that's what Trout was, a running back. So I do think that he could play that position. I do think that he could. I'm not saying he's going to be Mike Trout. I don't think he's going to be that good. Mike Trout was great from the get-go.
It's hard to ever call anybody a potential Hall of Famer. But
no,
there are moments where you can say, that's right, this guy could be a game changer.
Yes. I think if he's a guy that hits 280 and got a OPS of 800, 810 every year, well, then that's great. And that's exactly what you would want from him, especially if he's going to be doing that and playing center field.
But he's got the ability to do more than that.
Yeah, I think he does too. But I do think that if he's playing center field, those numbers play up. And I think they should be targeting him to do that, because he's going to play it more. I would have thought Evan Carter at one time, then you played him in left field. Maybe you play him in right field if Adolis doesn't pan out. I just don't know if you can count on Evan Carter.
But this gets back to another issue. If you have Leody Taveras, Leody's going to play center field. He's a better center fielder than Langford. If you move Langford to center field, that's because you've moved on from Leody Taveras, and it raises this question: who's going to play left field? Because this team is short on outfielders. Now, hopefully everybody's healthy next year, and you can go Carter in center, Langford in left, and Garcia in right, and maybe Taveras is more of a platoon type guy, and you can rotate those guys in and out of DH. Garcia could use a few DH days. But this goes back to where I think this club right now is short. They've got some guys to the big leagues in Langford and Carter and Young. They're short on position players who are going to break into the big leagues in the next year or two.
Well, this is where I think they need to make a deal, right? To me, you need to add a guy to this lineup who's going to play some left field, who's going to DH for you, be a primary DH in my mind, who could play a little left field if things don't work out with Carter, or primarily could play some left
field.
Yeah,
you've got to have better insurance policies than you had this year.
Oh, no question about that. All right, that's going to do it for the Rangers segment of our podcast. We're going to talk a little bit about college football. It was a big weekend. Not a great weekend for Evan's Georgia Bulldogs. That was a pretty incredible game. I was driving back from the Texas Mississippi State game where Arch Manning had a pretty big game. Looked pretty phenomenal out there. By far, I thought his best performance in college. He looked like a big time quarterback. He did have a lot of time standing back there, I'll say that. But he looks great in the pocket. He delivered some real strikes downfield, including a 62-yard, what should have been a 62-yard touchdown pass that was dropped. So he put up some big numbers. But anyway, driving back from that game, I'm listening to the Alabama-Georgia game, which is probably the most entertaining football game of the last, 5 years at least. To have Alabama run out to that huge first half lead, I guess 28-0 at one point, and then for Georgia to come storming all the way back and take the lead, and then to Alabama to win it at the very end. That's two heavyweights right there. That's
Alabama didn't win it at the very end. They took the lead at the very end. Georgia had the ball with about 52 seconds to play at the Alabama 25 and threw another pick on a ball that was underthrown. But it was a great game. It was a fantastic game. And this is for me, the mark of Kirby Smart as a game coach. I think he makes great in-game adjustments. You look at the Georgia comeback over Oklahoma in the playoffs 4 years ago. You look at the comeback against Ohio State 2 years ago. And to go into Bryant-Denny Stadium, fall down by 4 touchdowns, and hold the lead with under 2 minutes to play, just an amazing accomplishment. The other takeaway from that game is that Ryan Williams, the Alabama receiver, the 17-year-old Alabama receiver, is amazing. The touchdown catch that won the game for Alabama, the spinning move he made in the air as he came down with that ball, and how he avoided tacklers was, to me, just a work of art. And as a football fan, you watch that, and your team, the team you're rooting for, is losing. It's hard to do anything but sit there in awe of a play like that.
Yeah, they've got some talent. There's no question about that. It's interesting to see now. Of course, these rankings don't mean anything, the AP rankings, but Texas dropped from 1 to 2. Alabama went to number 1 because of that impressive win, even though it was at home. And then Alabama's still at 5. They dropped, but they won't have
Georgia's at 5. Georgia's at 5.
Georgia's at 5. I'm sorry. But they won't have a chance to move back up because they don't have anything on the schedule before the game between Texas and Georgia in Austin on October the 19th. Was really hoping that was going to be 1 and 2 playing at that point. It would have helped, just the drama of it, if nothing else. Still going to be a huge game. Be a huge game for Georgia. They can't afford to lose another SEC game. They would at that point be out of the SEC championship game. There's no way that a 2-loss team is going to get into that, I don't think, because I don't see Texas losing 2 games, and I don't see Alabama losing 2 games.
So October 19th, the Georgia-Texas game in Austin.
Yeah.
Same day, Alabama, number 1, plays number 4, Tennessee. So that's welcome to the college football playoff.
No kidding.
Basically, what you've got on October 19th is maybe the 2 biggest games of the year.
Yeah, that would be really fun. Some really fun football. I'm looking forward to that. Before we get to that point, Texas, of course, will be playing. They're off this week. Texas will be playing Oklahoma at the State Fair. Always a lot of fun, and you can never discount anything out of the blue happening there because of the emotional nature of that, the rivalry, the fact that the stadium is split in half, one fan base and the other 50-50. So a lot of things can happen, but I got to tell you, I don't see Oklahoma making a run at it at this point with the problems they've had at quarterback. I still say the way Brent Venables handled the whole situation with Dylan Gabriel, not even realizing that, he said at a press conference last week, I thought he was turning pro. How you can, as a head coach, cannot be certain of what your quarterback, and your very good quarterback, is going to be doing every moment of the day in an era of the transfer portal when quarterbacks are leaving left and right, is just malfeasance on from my standpoint. And I do think that Brent Venables is getting himself on a hot seat here, because if Texas blows out Oklahoma, and I don't know if that's going to happen, but if they were to do that and Oklahoma struggles, it's going to be a little bit like the situation at A&M with Mike Elko getting his first season in there. He has kind of put things back together after the loss to Notre Dame, and they played very well, especially with Marcel Reed at quarterback. They developed an identity as a very tough defensive team. Of course, he was a defensive coordinator. It's how he made his bones. And we'll see if he's able to hold that together. I do see that after the Georgia game, frankly, if I'm going to rank the biggest games that Texas has left on its schedule, number one, of course, is Georgia. Number two, to me, is Texas A&M. I think that's a bigger game for the Longhorns at this point than Oklahoma is. I think by the end of the season, the Aggies might really be pretty good.
I don't know how I'd rank Oklahoma and A&M right now in terms of which is a bigger game for Texas. The one thing I would just say is I do think, look, of all the SEC contenders, Texas has the easiest road to one of the top 4 spots. Georgia's already played Alabama. Alabama plays Tennessee. Georgia plays Tennessee. Texas does not play Alabama or Tennessee. So I think that Texas is in a really good position. But again, Kevin, the thing for me, about the SEC, I don't want to sound like Mr. SEC snob, is just how hard that schedule is from start to finish. Even the weaker teams, as you saw, I know Quinn Ewers was out this week, but Texas needed to pull away from Mississippi State late. It was a ball game for much of the game, and they can expect that week in and week out in this league.
Yeah, I think there were some odd things about that game and the game plan. And Steve Sarkisian kind of conceded a couple of points. One, why did you run the ball? I mean, Mississippi State's got the worst run defense in the league, and they come out throwing. Now, that's who Sarkisian is, right? And I have to feel like a little bit of that game for him was not so much beating Mississippi State by 30 or 38.5, which I think is what the point spread was. I think it was a little bit like, I want to see what Arch Manning's got here. I want to see if I cut him loose here in this last start of the season, which he hopes is his last start of the season, is what he's capable of. Well, I think he answered, in my mind, any question you could possibly want. There is no question he is the best backup quarterback in the country. I can't imagine anybody who has a better 1-2 punch of quarterbacks here than Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning. So I do think that was part of it. Things would have changed a little bit. They had a fumble down in the red zone. Jaden Blue fumbled a ball down there. It looked like they were on their way to scoring in that drive. And then, of course, as I mentioned, the drop 62-yard, but would have been a 62-yard touchdown pass. So that's 14 points more right there, right? So it could have been a little more. They were sloppy, no question about it, and they were sloppy and still won by what, 20-something points. So I do think that there are still some questions for Texas to answer. But as I was listening to one of the national broadcasts and at one of the radio talk show, I can't remember who it was that was talking, frankly, but he said there are 3 teams in my mind that have all the answers. They have an offense, they have a defense, and they have a quarterback. And those 3 teams were Alabama, Texas, and Tennessee, not Georgia. And so I have to wonder at that point, are they questioning the quarterback in Georgia at that point?
Well, Carson Beck had an awful game, 3 interceptions. As I was telling you guys before the game, before the show today, threw off his back foot literally on almost every pass. So he clearly was rattled in that environment and threw his timing off. And yeah, I think it knocks him out of the Heisman candidacy. I think Jalen Milroe right now is probably in the driver's seat there.
Did you see the Cam Ward play that won that game against Virginia Tech?
I didn't, but then again, it's Miami.
Well, yeah, I know. I tell you, that was an unbelievable play, and that was another great game, by the way. But he avoided 2 tackles and basically just shoveled it to a guy, and ended up being a game changing play. So, although that's the funny thing, we're talking about guys being candidates for the Heisman, and how many did Jalen Merrill have? 3 turnovers in that game. Used to be you had to be perfect, right? Especially as a quarterback. If you're throwing more than 1 interception a game, people are dinging you for that. I think maybe now what we're looking for is more spectacular plays. I know that some of the guys, I have a Heisman vote, and some of the guys who have that vote are still sticking with Travis Hunter, simply from the standpoint that the guy's playing both ways. He played 120 snaps the other day, which is just outrageous that a guy would get that many snaps in a ball game. But we'll see how that goes. All right. Is there anything else we need to talk about? Did I leave anything out?
Let's just give a nod to SMU for throttling Florida State, even though it's a shell of itself, or what its program once was.
That's still good. I tell you what, I'm impressed with what Rhett Lashley has done there at SMU. He just speaking of throttling, he throttled TCU, which is not a bad team. Maybe not a good team, but not a bad team. And then he goes out and does the same to Florida State. You can only play the teams in front of you, and they're playing in a bigger time conference than they've played in before, and actually a bigger time conference since they played in for 30 years.
Yeah.
So
I'll be interested to see how they look on the road against Louisville this week.
Yeah. No question about that. It'll be a big game. I was surprised at the spread on that. Saw the early spread seemed to give too many points to SMU. So we'll see what happens there. All right, that's going to do it. We appreciate you taking the time and coming by to see us. We'll be back next week to talk more about where the Cowboys are and see if they can build on that win over the Giants. Although it's just the Giants. I mean, my gosh, that's what the Giants are on the schedule, is to be a whipping boy for the Cowboys. But we'll see what happens going forward. And so from everybody in here to everybody out there, we'll see you next time, and thanks.